The science of human genetics has always been controversial. In many ways, it is just as controversial now in 2021 as it was in the 1860s when human genetics began in University College in central London. This course offers some introductory thoughts as to why this is so. Most public presentations about contemporary genetics begin with the sensational and the dramatic, the genetic revolution. Genetics, it is claimed, is set to revolutionize the way we think about society, medical care, education, and ourselves. In many ways, this is true, and we will study some of its impacts on contemporary society. Even so, it is possible that such claims are over-exaggerated. Again, this is something that we will consider in detail on this course. It is certainly a popular topic for science authors who want to write best-selling books. There are a number that have come out in the last 3 years that we will want to think about. Doubtless there will be books and papers which will be published in the next 3 months that we can also consider. In order to have a contemporary outlook on the impact of genetics on society, education and policy making, we will need to have an awareness of the history of the debate and how we have got to where we are. One aim of this course is to look at the principles behind genetics and especially recent developments in genomics to see how they can impact on the way we think about society and the way that we live our lives. But genetics also impacts on a more philosophical level of how we see ourselves and our place in the world. This course will also consider these more abstract aspects. You will get an opportunity to develop ideas that are particularly important and significant for yourselves, especially through the assignment. Genetics is a subject with relatively simple logical ideas, hiding behind a very complex vocabulary. We will learn to speak this vocabulary so that we will be able to contribute to the debate that is likely to intensify in the next few years. Along the way, we will need to examine our own thinking and potential misconceptions so that we can consider the bigger picture from a range of perspectives. We need to see how clear thinking might develop appropriate social policies for the next few decades. The first misconception we need to consider is whether the popular idea of what genes are is correct. The world loves the idea of genes being the secret controllers of our lives, genes promoting our destiny. It loves the idea that genes control our characteristics, that they are 4 things. Let me give you a few examples. These are all headlines from the popular right-wing newspaper, the Daily Mail, from between 2000 and 2005. Similar headlines appear almost every week. It gives a very clear public impression that a single gene can have a dramatic impact upon our personality, our characteristics, and the way in which we can live our lives. This is something that we need to consider in detail. To what extent is it true, but also to what extent is it a misconception? Back in the 1970s and the 1980s, some geneticists did think that genes control all human characteristics. This partly came about through the study of identical twins who had been separated at birth and then reunited in later life. Scientists discovered that they were extraordinarily similar, even though they'd had no contact with each other since the separation. This led them to propose the idea that genes must be somehow strongly influencing personality and lifestyle choices, such as our taste in music or beer or cigarettes or cars or where we want to have a vacation or our taste in partners. However, since the Human Genome Project reported in the year 2000, it has become increasingly clear that genes cannot have such a direct role in determining our personalities. Therefore, we need to have a new way of thinking about it. What is clear is that genes do have an influence. To believe that we are only like blank slates upon which life writes its experiences is just as false as the idea that genes control the minutiae of our lives and that we are little more than slaves or robots to our genes. We need a new way of thinking which is different to either of those old approaches. This is something that we will explore at length during the course. Even so, the idea that genes somehow predetermine our characteristics is deeply embedded within the science of genetics. If it is true, then we can reduce complex behaviours and personality traits to the effect of predetermined genetic causes. And since we acquired our genomes at our moments of conception, we should be able to predict early on in our lives who is likely to show which behaviours. Again, this is something that we shall consider in detail during the course. Everything we know about science is filtered through the popular media. We will ask ourselves to what extent any of this is likely to be true. To what extent are geneticists making bold public statements to the media and much more tentative private statements to each other behind the scenes, away from the microphones? The American geneticist Robert Plomin, who works in London, has written a significant contemporary book about human genetics called Blueprint, which was published in 2019. We will use Blueprint as the basis for much of this course. It is a book that I would like you to read, at least parts of. This is the opening quotation from the book.